Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, January 4th, 2022. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Suzanne Schneider, Deputy Director and Core Faculty at the Brooklyn Institute, author of The Apocalypse and the End of History, Modern Jihad, and the Crisis of Liberalism. Also on the program today, Chuck Schumer will hold a vote on filibuster reform for voting rights. New York AG Letitia James subpoenas Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr. over Trump Inc.'s fraud case. More cities pause in-person schooling as a COVID tsunami hits. The new mayor of New York, Eric Adams, he says it's over. Meanwhile, over 1 million new infections yesterday. Fortunately, some mounting evidence that Omicron somewhat milder and that the vaccines are working, at least in saving lives. George W. Bush appointed federal judge blocks the Department of Defense COVID vaccine mandate because apparently there's some religion out there that is against specific vaccines. Elizabeth Holmes found guilty of four counts in the Theranos fraud. January 6th Commission moving into high gear. And of course, Trump endorses Viktor Orban in the Hungarian elections coming up in spring. Those nurses in Worcester, they signed their contract ending a 10-month strike, the longest for nurses in Massachusetts history. And New York State looks like it's on track to quash some Republican seats in Congress. All that and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Emma is still on vacation. She will be out for the rest of the week. I still have my beard and my vacation glasses. We may play out the week that way. I'm not sure. The beard gets a little itchy sometimes, but supposedly you grow through that stage.
People are really engaged with it.
People seem to be very, it's very polarizing. It's very polarizing, the beard. But I will say this. I feel like it might be warmer. It's been very cold the past 2 days walking down to work. And I feel like the beard is helping with that on the face. I'm starting to understand the sort of material benefits of the beard. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. We'll of course dedicate an entire show to that in the coming days, I'm sure. Meanwhile, Build Back Better is still in some form of, I don't know, arrested development. I don't know. What do you, cold storage? I don't know what you call it.
Life support, cryogenics.
Exactly. Chuck Schumer is, however, is turning up the pressure on voting rights. He apparently, according to a Dear Colleague letter, he will hold a vote on some type of filibuster reform, specifically in regards to voting rights. Here he is with Joy Reid explaining.
Have the two conservative Democrats who've been standing in the way of changing the filibuster signed on to anything that looks like either of those two options?
We are having active discussions with them, several a day. I just spoke to Senator Manchin 3 or 4 hours ago. And even over the holiday break, the New Year's and Christmas break, we've been talking constantly, not just me, but just about every one of the 48 Democratic senators who supports not only the proposal, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Restore the Voting Rights Act, but changing the rules. There are a variety of different rules changes, some of which you've mentioned, some of which you haven't, which we're exploring with them, which we're pushing with them. And whichever one works to get us to have voting rights kept, to undo the pernicious activities of the Republican legislatures, we will accept. And we're having constant discussions. And we've said to them, you, both Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, say they believe in voting rights. Good. That's great. And they are sponsors of the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Act. But just to believe in it and not change the rules. And we're making it clear to them, Joy, that even a paragon who believed in the Senate rules, Robert C. Byrd, changed the rules 9 times.
I mean, that's a message specifically from Manchin. It seems very hard to believe that Kyrsten Sinema at this point, too. And there's a real sense that Sinema realizes she may have made a grave miscalculation, thinking that she could do some type of mirror version of John McCain. Because the polling is out, and she's in big trouble in the Democratic Party. And it is, and I imagine she got out a little ahead of her skis, in front of her skis, before she saw how Mark Kelly is going to do in 2024. Because it looks like 2022. Mark Kelly is up for re-election. He might do a little better than she anticipated. So the real issue here is Manchin, and that is why Schumer talks about Byrd, because supposedly, in the narrative that Manchin at least wants to be put out there, that his fealty to the filibuster is a function of Robert Byrd. And so the argument will be made in that way, and this is part of Joe Manchin's Reformation project, it seems to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some version of filibuster reform narrowly tailored to some type of voting rights bill. But we'll see. We'll have a better sense of this in the coming weeks. As far as Build Back Better, of course, once Joe Manchin, if he does go along with the idea of cutting back on the filibuster in some way, he basically owns Build Back Better and will be able to do whatever he wants, which, of course, it sounds like immiserate people who have been benefiting from the child tax credit. We have an insane system in this country, and some of that actually pertains to what our guest, Suzanne Schneider, will be talking about and what she writes about in The Apocalypse and the End of History, Modern Jihad and the Crisis of Liberalism, which we will get to in a moment. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. If you got a small business, you know that there's nothing more valuable than your time. So stop wasting it by leaving your office ever, particularly when you have to go to the post office. Post office right now is, well, look, it's also the case, I noticed this when I walked to work too, like any type of package place, doesn't matter if it's the post office or, you know, one of those private entities that ship stuff. You can avoid all that with stamps.com. It makes it easy to mail and ship right from your computer. You can send letters and you can send packages, and you can do so for less with discounted rates not only from the U.S. Postal Service, but also UPS and more. Since 1998, Stamps.com has been indispensable for nearly 1 million businesses. Stamps.com brings the services of the U.S. Postal Service and UPS shipping right to your computer. You can print official postage for any letter, any package, to go anywhere you want to send it. Once your mail is ready, you just schedule a pickup or you drop it off. Easy peasy. Stamps.com new rate advisor tool, you can compare shipping rates and timelines to easily find the best option. Back when we were doing, when we were sending out DVDs in the early days, I guess this was a long time ago now. I was printing out Stamps.com postage like at 3 in the morning. It's the way I rolled back then. It was when I was younger. Now I do it during business hours. Makes it just much easier. And of course, you get discounts. You can save time and you can save money with Stamps.com. There's no risk. With my promo code Majority Report, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. There's no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the page, type in Majority Report. One word, Majority Report. At Stamps.com, promo code Majority Report. Stamps.com, never leave your office again. Or your home, for that matter. Or your home office. Good time to stay inside. Or maybe not necessarily get in lines and crowds, if you know what I'm saying. Meanwhile, using the internet without ExpressVPN is basically like leaving your laptop exposed at the coffee shop table while you run to the bathroom. You would never do that. Most of the time, you're probably fine. Nobody's going to get up, move over with their coffee, start messing around. But the bottom line is, one day may come, you come out of the bathroom and your laptop, it's gone. Every time you connect with an unencrypted network, any hacker on the same network can gain access to your personal data, like passwords, financial details, etc., etc. All you got to do is they go into your web browser preferences, look up your password. It's not that hard. A smart 12-year-old with some cheap hardware could do it. And they could make up to $1,000 selling your personal info. I like to think mine might be worth a little bit more than that, but ExpressVPN creates a super secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so that hackers can't steal your sensitive data. It works on all devices. It's super easy to use. You just fire up the app, you click one button, and you're protected. I don't even know why they say fire up the app. You just you click on the app, you click one button. That's it. It's super easy. I don't even think about it anymore. In the copy, they say, tell your audience what you like most about ExpressVPN. The thing I like most about it, I don't think about it anymore. I just use it, and I don't have to worry about anything. It's just a lack of anxiety to know I have one more level of protection. That's basically, why do I wear a mask when I go into a store, even when we were down and numbers were down? Because I don't want to even think about it. And then the other part I like about it is that I can stream stuff from a different place, if you know what I mean. ExpressVPN hides your location. You can secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/majority. That's ExpressVPN, ExpressVPN.com/majority, and you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/majority. expressvpn.com/majority. We will put links to that in our YouTube and podcast descriptions. And as always, it's your support that keeps this show going. If you want to support the show and get the first half ad-free, become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, a reminder, the live show not happening on January 16th. I think everybody knows this by now. We have punted to May 15th at 2 p.m. You can either exchange your tickets, or if you want a refund, or you need a refund, info at Wilbur. Is it Wilbur.com? thewilbur.com. info@thewilbur.com. You can check out our newsletter for more information. All right, I want to welcome to the program Sarah Schneider. She's Deputy Director and Core Faculty at the Brooklyn Institute, author of The Apocalypse and the End of History, Modern Jihad and the Crisis of Liberalism. I'm sorry, did I say Suzanne? It's Suzanne. Suzanne, welcome.
Hello, nice to be on.
All right, so it's nice to have you. So I want to start with some stuff that's fairly maybe remedial, just so that we have our terms, everybody's on the same page with terms. Let's just start at the end. When we say liberalism, what are we talking about?
Great question. So at least when political theorists use the term liberalism, we don't tend to just mean it as a kind of contemporary political movement associated with, say, like, Hillary Clinton or something like this, but as a broader kind of project that really has roots in the 17th century, going back to figures like John Locke, that advances this argument that there's some sort of necessary relationship between democracy, freedom of the markets, and individual liberty. And that kind of holds those three things up and kind of elevates them. That goes along with, private property rights, the idea that government exists in order to preserve and protect private property, that again, the freedom of the market is mirrored by individual liberty. So it's a kind of, much broader system of political thought that has its roots, again, way back in the 17th century, and that is broadly shared, I would say, across the political constituency, not just by people who would call themselves liberals today.
Okay, and in some respects, the phenomena that you are looking at here is a function, you would argue, of a failure of liberalism. And so what was the idea behind that? Aside from, we get a sense of what the structure of liberalism, what was the purpose of espousing liberalism at that time and ostensibly through the following centuries?
Well, I mean, we could elevate a few different things, but some sort of popular sovereignty, right? The idea, it's a kind of an anti-monarchical position. It's a democratic position associated, that's really espoused historically by this kind of emerging merchant bourgeois class that is interested in free trade and the kind of acquisition of wealth through sources other than just the feudal system where wealth is tied to the land. And liberalism is a very durable political system. And we say that, many people, even people further to the left, there's plenty about liberalism that we're not willing to kind of give up on or abandon, right? A commitment to individual rights and freedoms, I think, being kind of paramount among them. The question is whether that kind of essential relationship that's laid out originally in the 17th century, that's re-articulated in the 19th century and kind of dug into by a kind of class of people we call the neoliberals, right? There's this essential idea of kind of capitalism and democracy is going hand in hand, whether or not that really still works for us today in the 21st century. And I think you start to see the cracks where those things are pulling apart today. And that is one of the reasons that we kind of, one of the reasons people talk about some sort of a crisis of liberalism, because on the one hand, you see capitalism being taken up, espoused by and flourishing in places which are certainly not liberal democracies, whether we're looking at the Gulf or whether we're looking at kind of some sort of state capitalism in China, and that, these two things may actually pull in opposite directions, right? And on the other hand, you have a critique from the left that genuine democracy may require a taming of the market and subjecting the market forces to popular sovereignty in a way that would be an anathema to kind of classic liberal thinking.
Okay, and so now let's jump to work it sort of backwards through your title to jihad. I mean, just the idea of a modern jihad.
Yeah,
we have this sense in this country, or we've been told by many, and you cite some of the new atheists, and we've had opportunity around here to critique some of those new atheists, that that jihad is almost not quite eternal, but certainly has been sort of a thing that exists regardless of context from the beginning of Islam. Tell us, I guess, just what is jihad, A, and then B, let's talk about that context of the idea of it. There's actually It has a history, and as we see it today, it's different.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So there, you're pulling on a few different threads, and I'll see if I can try to kind of individually pull them out and then weave them back together. Right. So in terms of, yes, jihad, like other forms of war, has a history. And some of the mystification, I think, that's attached to that term and the exoticism that gets overlaid it, particularly in the US or the West more broadly post 9/11, kind of starts to evaporate if you think about it as a form of warfare that was historically waged by Muslim leaders and governments. And that the kind of holy war has this association with something so much broader than just like a form of warfare that was kind of the type of war waged by Muslim rulers. But even to kind of go back a little bit further, right, jihad etymologically has a bunch of different meanings that linguists point to, having to do with the kind of underlying Arabic term has to do with the concept of striving. There's definitely a possibility of having a jihad that has nothing to do with violence. There's kind of ample evidence for this within the kind of classical sources. And I acknowledge that, but I am also actually interested in the type of jihad, which really means war. And looking at the way that has evolved over centuries, it would be very strange if a form of violence did not evolve at all. And to have that kind of ahistorical look at war, which we wouldn't support that in our own instances, like we look at, right, the kind of way that warfare has changed from, say, the 17th century to the present. Like the war on terror doesn't look anything like the American Revolution. Why would jihad look like it did in the medieval period? So yes, we kind of have to get away from these constructions about jihad as an essential thing, as an ahistorical thing, as something that remains the same over kind of time and place, and which is related to kind of a broader tendency to think about Islam as something that exists outside of time, outside of material conditions, that has some sort of fixity that we don't assign to anybody else. And kind of, so once we kind of back up from that, essentialist view, we can see something really different, which is that up until roughly the beginning of the 20th century, jihad is, yes, something that's declared by a recognized ruler. So the kind of most recent example of this is during the First World War, when the Ottoman kind of Sultan Caliph declares jihad as the Ottoman Empire enters the war. You are conscripted to fight in a jihad in the way that you might be drafted to fight war. It is not like a vigilante sort of activity. But something really shifts radically in the mid-20th century as kind of a variety of kind of the post-colonial states seem to lack legitimacy in the eyes of their people, where they say, wait. How can these rulers be trusted upon to wage jihad? They're not even legitimate rulers. Who's going to do this? Actually, all that responsibility now is going to devolve to us as individuals. Jihad then becomes an insurrectionist tool, a revolutionary tool. So if most of its history, it's like a tool of states, it suddenly becomes a tool that's turned against states. And this is the form that we inherited today. And it's such a radical and revolutionary shift, but yet it's like completely absent from most of the kind of contemporary conversation. But if we think about it with the broader arc of, of the rest of the world, of kind of the development of different forms of violence, it makes a lot of sense to say, well, actually jihad has been privatized. In much the same way that other forms of violence have been privatized. Like, this shouldn't actually be that surprising, if we are able to abandon, again, that like essentialist view that thinks Islam is totally different and outside of the currents that are happening in the rest of the world.
Okay, so I want to go back over some of because I think that's a lot. That's a lot for people to absorb. That dynamic. That now, was there not an era where we did not have as well-defined nation states, so that there was an era that maybe existed, and I don't know if it would have been considered jihad necessarily. And again, we're not talking about the development of the sort of the from a tactical standpoint as much as, although that's probably the case in methodological, but we're talking about the purpose of jihad and what it's supposed to achieve. But would there not have been some measure of violence that you could describe as being privatized prior to that, or would that just simply have been sort of more of a feudal type of system?
Well, no, I think that's exactly right. Is that the conceit of the modern state is that it's going to subject violence to kind of public control of some form or another. And that, which is why kind of certain people, talk about us in this like period of like neo-feudalism, where people have like private armies again alongside, the ways that, your feudal lords may have in like the 15th century or something. Right? Jihad has existed outside of the nation state, which is a really recent formation, right? But it's often existed right within the kind of empires, within kind of caliphates, or even just local rulers that are recognized as kind of having, some sort of control of the territory. So it's not that it's tied to the nation state so much as it's tied to a recognized political authority. That is what is different. And that it's kind of, declaration it has to be in the hands of someone who is recognized as an imam, as a leader.
Okay, and so now we have a situation where, at least in the context of jihad, we have this sort of privatized version where it is, and in some ways, it is both. Well, it's a reflection of what has happened to liberalism, right? And it's also in some ways, it's antithetical to liberalism from a theoretical standpoint, insofar as it's not democratized, the waging of jihad. But in many respects, your argument is that it's also very reflective of liberalism as it exists in the world today.
Yeah, I mean, it's really complicated, unfortunately, right? It's even because it even changes within the modern history of jihad. So like one of the key figures here, writing in the 1950s and 1960s, is an Egyptian thinker by the name of Sayyid Qutb, who's kind of broadly viewed as the father of modern jihad ideology. And actually a lot of his critiques of kind of the existing political authorities and rulers do have a kind of democratic undertone to them. That is precisely because these leaders are corrupt and were not chosen by the people, that they can be disobeyed, and that jihad devolves onto individuals because they can't be trusted with that responsibility. And there's the real elevation here of one of liberalism's kind of key key figures, the individual, the kind of the celebration of individuals and individual responsibility, individual duty, that kind of runs throughout the course of this history of modern jihad, where we can't trust the collective is no longer able or trusted with the kind of performing of certain duties. These things devolve onto you as an individuals and individual responsibilities. It's like radically, it's a massive revolution within Islamic law to say that this is an individual duty in this way. So it's like, there's a strange kind of mimicry and negation of the concepts and frameworks of liberalism that you see in something like jihad. But again, you'll never see that if you just kind of, take the new atheists or whomever of the world at their word for it, that this is some weird medieval phenomenon. Because once you start delving into the sources themselves, you see not just their modernity, but really like their hyper-modernity. And they start to make sense as a kind of real products of the modern world, not as a kind of product of a former one.
And I just want to plant a flag in what you've just talked about, because I feel like I read a Washington Post article about Republican opinions that sort of track with that same sort of description of this sense of government has failed and we got to take it upon ourselves. And, it's I mean, on some level, it's don't tread on me.
Certainly.
And so, but let's talk more about, and you're looking specifically at ISIS. Like, what makes ISIS unique in terms of a break from this tradition, or the trajectory, I guess, of this tradition?
So ISIS was, often collapsed with, Al Qaeda or kind of other groups, but really it did have something unique about it, in which, Al Qaeda is it is a billionaire playboy creation of a different sort, essentially, and it had this kind of elitist kind of vanguard quality to it, and that saw jihad as a chiefly kind of like a moral quest that Muslims were called to do on this like massive global scale. But they didn't ever think about establishing a kind of parallel political authority. Right? They would say all of these, various nation states are corrupt and illegitimate, but the notion of kind of, of establishing a new caliphate was pretty far from their thinking, right? So ISIS, or the Islamic State, was novel in that it attempted to really create this alternative form of political, social, religious authority by reestablishing a caliphate, which had been dissolved in 1924 by the kind of new secular government of Turkey. So this is kind of one thing that distinguishes them. On the one hand, they advance a more exclusionary view of the political community, of the Muslim community, even than Al-Qaeda, which is something that's just fascinating and that we can certainly point to that corresponds in certain ways with thinking in the kind of new far right circles about who is in and who is out, what the community, who really belongs to the community. And you saw a lot of this in the kind of intercommunal or intracommunal violence, which was so marked in Syria and Iraq during the kind of heyday, attacking kind of, rival tribes that refuse to submit to their authority, really attacking the kind of established clergy, executing them en masse in many instances, right? It's attacks on the Shia. This notion that there's a real community, the real ummah, but that most people don't belong to it. So there's this, pretense of universality that comes along with a very, very exclusionary vision as to who the real community is. And I find that really fascinating about them, that on the one hand, the global vision, and on the other hand, the incredibly narrow idea as to who really belongs.
How do those two things coexist? I mean, how can you, how do those two ideas coexist?
Well, they coexist we think of a few things. On the one hand, right, this is something that's clearly facilitated by global media. You can't have this vision of political community outside of a fully networked, system of communications, media, online platforms, et cetera. It's just simply impossible. Because on the other hand, it depends on the notion of an elect. All right, there's an elitist, right? It's like a populist elitism, almost of that we are the ones who truly get it. It's going to be a kind of small self-selecting crew of people who are kind of truly brave and willing to kind of look through all of the lies and will see the truth. And so it's and it's a fascinating kind of way to think about communities. A fascinating way to think about a political entity as well, which, something that isn't necessarily like sovereign anywhere, but that has adherents everywhere. And I think it's that those two dynamics kind of do go hand in hand, but the notion of an elect or kind of a select crew of people who have kind of chosen to embrace this path is something that unites them. And that also kind of points to something really fundamental here, which is that this gives people a sense of agency. This gives people a sense that they have choices to make in the world, even amid all of these systemic kind of, systems of oppression that seem to order their lives, and that they have a place they can make a difference. And that should not be underestimated as something that really gives appeal to these far-right movements at this particular time.
Do I understand this correctly too, that there's another paradox insofar as that it's both apocalyptic in the sense that we need to move into a sort of like, I guess, another stage of human existence, and it's not as it's in reaction to a failure of sort of the material world on some level, but we're not going to fix that so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the apocalyptic exit as almost like an escape hatch, right? Of recognizing that the world as it is untenable for so many people, which I do believe that is the case. And that, but for many decades, right, the kind of the discourse, and this has not just been kind of among conservatives, but kind of left, right, center, has largely been there is no alternative, right? This is the way the world is, and we may have some sort of like small, little tweaks that we can make, some sort of kind of technocratic maneuvers that will make things slightly less miserable for people, but that a different kind of social and political order is fundamentally outside of our capacity. And I think that there is something very debilitating about that message, and that the far right, for better or for much worse, has been the ones who's been articulating a different vision. Now, the vision that they're articulating, I would argue, is never going to lead to human flourishing. It's only going to lead to more suffering and misery, which is why the apocalypse is a very handy kind of mechanism, right? Because it both expresses a sense of frustration with the world as it is, and a belief in some sort of alternative, but it removes the burden of having to actually articulate what that alternative might be and how it might actually allow us to live and not merely to die.
It's sort of like the Republicans wanting to, I guess, repeal the Affordable Care Act on some level. I mean, I don't want to diminish it in that sense, but there is that quality of like, we just need to get rid of this, and then something will come back in and take care of everything. But let's, I want to, you write at one point that the last several decades themselves have generated a specific type of religious militancy. And I guess we see this in the context of it developing into an ISIS, let's say. But let's start to bring together these two sort of what appear at first glance a disparate and almost antithetical worlds, but are in fact on some level a reflection of each other, or a causation in some respects. So, I mean, tease that out for us. Like, what is it about the last several decades? A, and B, what is the religious militancy that has been generated is different, and that I would imagine applies not just to what we see in the context of ISIS, but also, I don't know, I got 3 stories today about January 6th involving some form of sort of like quasi Christian patriot organizations or something.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, certainly we can and should think about religion and religious sensibilities operating outside of, purely like, spaces that we recognize immediately as religious, right? Like there is a religious aesthetics to QAnon, certainly, right? It depends on kind of similar structures of faith, belief, of electedness, of chosenness. There's all sorts of, layers of this, even within things that would not necessarily be explicitly recognized as religious. So we have to kind of, I think a little bit broadly also about like what that term is and what it is that we're invoking. We talk about things kind of, having a religious element to them. But, I think, let me see, how should we approach this question? One way of approaching this question is maybe to lean a little bit into what I don't think is helpful, right? I don't think it's helpful to kind of pathologize, kind of these people who are part of these kind of extreme groups as either like nut jobs or wackadoos or terrorists. Like all of these terms get kind of thrown around. And they're not actually very helpful to understanding, well, why are these movements flourishing today? Like, what are the kind of structural forces that kind of produce them? Because we know from any number of studies that like people who join them are not like, but they don't have some sort of like a pathology. That's not actually the thing that we can lean into in order to explain them. It has to be something else. So I really do think about this kind of going back to that question of agency, which I highlighted before, that people, I think, there's a few things. There's a question of agency, there's a question of community and belonging. And then, yes, there's a question about a kind of critique of the status quo. How is it that we are going to do those things? So on the one hand, right, people do feel really demobilized. People, theorists like Wendy Brown talk about this as an effect of neoliberalism. It's this mode of politics that's made to almost make you feel small, to make you feel like the overarching systems are just too big to tackle. And, so we can like scream about them on Twitter, but we don't have much in the way of like real civic agency in order to address them. And I think that these types of movements thrive on that sense of disenchantment with the status quo and that sense of demobilization, and that there aren't really pathways of civic agency. I think that these communities hold out community of a real and kind of robust sort, which is something that's in kind of short supply in many countries, particularly under kind of conditions of contemporary capital. And that, yes, that is frankly quite appealing to a lot of people. And not without reason. Like the agency, community, these are actually things that we want people to be able to have. But then it does become a problem when the only people who are offering them up are those on the kind of the far right. Yeah.
Well, there's 2 things I want to unpack there. I want to get to your definition of neoliberalism in a moment too, because that's also another word that we hear used quite a bit, and it's sort of almost catch-all. But speaking in terms of the pathologies, There is, and I'm just curious as to your sense of this, and maybe this doesn't constitute a pathology, but there is clinical research that suggests that we have, 25%, I think it was, Bob Altemeyer up in University of Manitoba, this is years ago, but was doing work on right-wing authoritarianism, and over the course of a 20, 30-year career had determined that there was about 25% of North Americans were right-wing authoritarians. This authoritarianism is, I guess, is there, and it's latent, and it's played into, and it needs to be activated. And so maybe it's these contexts that is being generated that creates an environment for that type of authoritarianism to sort of like kick into high gear, right? I mean, is that the idea?
I think that's very close to it, because yes, it's right. We certainly know that there are people who have more authoritarian proclivities, but I think that people lean into those, or can lean into them, particularly when they feel like the pathways for political change through traditional means are hollowed out, or they're bankrupt, they don't lead anywhere. So that sense of mass disenchantment, all of our politicians, they're all the same, nothing yet, right? That kind of talk always kind of piques my ears as something that kind of really can support an authoritarian kind of alternative, because it's at that moment of kind of total disenchantment with the status quo, and with, again, all the traditional means of change within the kind of system as it is, that you open up those kind of possibilities for an authoritarian ruler, right? Someone like a Trump figure to kind of surge onto the stage and say, yes, I recognize all your woes, they're valid, and I am the only one who can fix them. The problem is that you've been trying to fix these things through democratic means, which is, again, strikingly similar to what the Islamic State kind of says in terms of why it rejects democracy as a political model. I mean, there's a lot of writing. You don't think about ISIS as being political theorists, but there's a lot of political writing they have about kind of the failures of democracy as a political model, that, many of them kind of lean into this this kind of impossibility of affecting real change through democratic means, in addition to kind of critiques of democracy as theoretically kind of coming from a particular view of divine sovereignty.
Okay, now, and I want you to expand on your concept of neoliberalism, because I think to some extent we discuss it around here in the context of a fealty to the market, and maybe going back to like the Mont Pelerin crew, who it's a fealty to the market, but also with like maybe a thumb on the scale if you have control of government.
Absolutely.
But talk about the broader implications that it creates for a democratic society that go beyond it as an economic prescription.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, because yes, this is not just a kind of question of an economic model, but if we think about economic models also have these kind of massive political and social effects as well. So, neoliberalism is kind of sometimes thought about as like a small government approach, right? Where this idea of kind of a laissez-faire, or the government kind of backing away from intervention in the markets, that kind of along the lines of that kind of Keynesian New Deal era, kind of American Depression kind of period, where there was this consensus that the government had to play a role in kind of managing the economy, in particular, adopting things like countercyclical spending, for instance, to try to kind of soften the blows of different financial crises. So neoliberalism emerges as this kind of critique of that kind of New Deal or kind of Keynesian interventionism of the state and the economy. But it's not really a small government project at the end of the day. It's much more accurate to think about neoliberalism as a project of state capture and redeployment, where corporate lobbyists are like literally writing the bills that are then adopted by the Congress, for instance, with regard to regulation. That's not the government getting out of the way of business. That is literally business gaining the upper hand over government. So I like to think about neoliberalism as that kind of practice of state capture, where government's powers are deployed in the service of the market and its beneficiaries, kind of over above the kind of public good. And this is why also neoliberalism doesn't come with there's certainly no shrinking of the state in terms of policing or mass incarceration or military, right? All of those kind of mechanisms of state violence that are required to uphold the kind of status quo, those things get all the funding in the world under neoliberalism, but like, of course, like education or, you know, addiction treatment programs or, God forbid, federally funded daycare, right? These things are never going to, these things are supposed to be solved by the market. So in terms of the kind of type of politics that this advances, it's right. I mean, it really does give us people like Donald Trump, this notion that businessmen are the people who are best equipped to run the country, that things should be run like a business, that schools should be run like a business, that right, all of our public services will be better accommodated if we only subject them to market forces. And what that means is that politics is not supposed to be a space where we collectively come together and decide how we want things to be and solve problems, right? It means that we're supposed to give up all of these, you know, kind of public interventions that a democracy would normally have to the market and whoever that benefits. And we know that that benefits really people who already have a lot of resources and advantage. So it is, you know, so this is why people talk about neoliberalism as something that has an anti-democratic underpinning to it, because the purpose, if you know, of taking all of these things outside of the realm of public deliberation and putting them into the hands of the market, really means putting them beyond the capacity of like a public to change things in a way that might be better.
Right. I mean, it's both purpose and process, right? I mean, they referred to George W. Bush as the CEO president, and that's a problem, both in terms of like who the CEO is working for, which tends to be the board of directors and himself, but it's also a problem because CEOs are not elected. They're chosen, and they're not. I mean, they're if they were elected, then the workers theoretically would all vote on who they want to. Well, maybe they wouldn't even choose a CEO per se, but that is so. It's both the process and the sort of the material outcome from that, from once that process is installed.
Yeah, no, I think that that's exactly right. And just, I mean, I said, this is pervasive, again, like left, right, center. Anytime we hear people talking about how X public good should be run like a business, or this person is uniquely qualified to run for public office because they ran a company, right? These are all kind of legacies of this neoliberal turn and the kind of, you know, fetishization of like basically business principles and their application to every realm.
And so, okay, so how does then, when we see something like ISIS, how is that a well, at one point you call it a form of colonial blowback, neoliberalism.
Yeah.
Explain
so
that.
My view of neoliberalism, right? Like I'm trained as a historian, particularly as like a historian of the Middle East. And so as I'm kind of reading through a lot of these sources and seeing about things that are happening in the States or in other Western countries over the last few years, it all feels a little bit like eerily familiar to me, because what it is, it's this process of state capture by capital, where the state is made to serve the ends of capital and to suppress the kind of popular resentment that kind of comes from that. And that's exactly the kind of the distribution of kind of state, market, and violence that you see in colonies and kind of the classic colonial situations, where the state is there to serve the ends of kind of private capital, who is there to exploit people and to prevent the people essentially from rising up and overthrowing the system. And so we can, you know, rather than always thinking about our political models as emerging in the West and then kind of getting disseminated and spreading to the rest of the world, I tend to think about the colonies as being this key site of emergence for different political forms. And yeah, neoliberalism, you know, one way of thinking about it, I'm not saying this is the only way, but this is the way that I tend to think about it, is as this kind of form of colonial blowback, wherein those conditions that have like long prevailed in the kind of colonized world are suddenly being felt right back home. We're like, really, who's in charge of this place anyway? Like, right? Like our government is theoretically sovereign, but yet we can't figure out how to do the most basic thing, which is tax our most major corporations. Like it really does throw into kind of sharp relief the question as to who is really like running the ship here.
Is it blowback from colonialism, or is it sort of on some level I don't want to say self-imposed, but it's simply imposed. It's a domestic colonialism.
It's a domestic application of again a series of conditions which I think have long prevailed in the colonial world and even in the post-colonial world. And the reason that you, I think, have that overlaps between the Islamic State and the American far right, et cetera. These things are not exact, and I've kind of written about the distinctions here, at length. But I do think that one thing that's interesting by studying these kind of militant movements in the Middle East or kind of across the global South more broadly is that they're frankly at a more advanced stage of state fragmentation than we are. Right, where the states in these places have not functioned as a vehicle for the public good for decades, if not centuries. And this type of militancy, I think, is a direct result of that kind of state fragmentation, the inability to govern, the inability, right? People have to have like some sort of buy-in, some sort of faith in the system. And that faith doesn't just come from people repeating kind of ad nauseum that democracy is awesome. It comes because they see some sort of material benefits of that. And if you get to a point where people can no longer see the material benefits of that, then you really do have this kind of possibility for a kind of a crisis of governance and a possibility of fragmentation.
So it's conceivable that we are evolving on some level, or
we might be catching up.
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to right, and let's talk about that, because you also make the argument that liberalism, broadly speaking, and I think that we've been talking about this at least maybe sort of around the edges a little bit, is that liberalism has failed to control violence, which was part of if not the purpose, but certainly the purpose of it, right? I mean, you can't have all of these operations of modern society, as liberalism was purportedly a system to provide, if you have ongoing violence, because there must, and talk about the different ways that it's failed, both in terms of, individual violence and state violence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a few different ways of even kind of opening up into this question. But on the one hand, that there's, right, in theory, under liberalism, right, we've all kind of traded our right for private violence. Right. So, Sam, if you come and rob my house, I'm not going to like chase you down. I'm going to call the police. Right. I'm abandoning my right to private violence, and I'm giving it over to some sort of sovereign, some sort of state authority that's supposed to kind of enforce the law on my behalf. And this is at least the theory.
And the same thing with, like, we have a contract and you didn't fulfill it, instead of me coming over there and, with a bat and saying, give me my cow or whatever it is, I go to court.
Yes, but my daughter takes Taekwondo, so you better watch out if you try that.
But I did too.
But yes, no, that's precisely the idea. Now, we already see the breakdown of that system for quite a long time here. Right, one place you can look at it is the kind of privatization of violence in terms of like the American military, for instance. Right, we had where we just had this kind of disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, but it's like often not noted that for many years there have been way more private contractors in Afghanistan than there have been regular servicemen, and that has been the case in Iraq as well. And really, going back to the mid 1990s and the rise of Blackwater, it's been a kind of privatization bonanza of what else but actually like state violence. So that and that's important, because it means that we have less accountability, we have less insight, oversight, kind of in control really over the violence that's being inflicted. Right, Americans have right. This has kind of been a feature of the war on terror that was so notable, is that people are just so in the dark about what was happening. Right, 80 plus countries that we've been conducting global war on terror operations in. Like, I'm guessing people can maybe name a fraction of them, if any at all. Right, that level of kind of opacity into the way that state violence is occurring is kind of part of this like loss of public control over this thing. And of course, right, we could talk also about the ways in which that blowback occurs through the militarization of police forces and kind of, the kind of, change in policing, so on and so forth. So all of that violence is real and I think it does signal kind of a crisis for liberalism in terms of we don't really have the thing that we're supposed to have, which is democratic control over violence. But there's another piece of that as well, right? That stuff is kind of the spectacular violence, the news-making violence. We can also think about, what people like Rob Nixon calls slow violence, which is just like the everyday grinding violence of essentially of like the market that the state is complicit in. So when you have people kind of, who live in right next to sites of kind of toxic waste that has kind of been dumped on, right, and are kind of dying of cancer or other diseases, right? This is a form of violence as well. But it's, again, not the kind of same headline grabbing. When you have people who are, suffering heat stroke in their kind of, because they have inadequate housing in, the American Southwest, for instance, as we saw kind of over the last summer, this is also a form of violence. So I think it's, and in theory, we don't want people in a democracy to be subjected to this type of violence either, which is often the violence really of market forces that the state is complicit in.
And where does the idea that we have these massive explosion of gun sales in a time where ostensibly there doesn't seem to be any call for it, right? I mean, it's almost just sort of like there's this sort of increase in potential violence, right? Yeah. I mean, every gun and bullet bought is, just sitting there, on the desk, as it were, waiting for Act 3.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I kind of written about this for Mother Jones a while back about the kind of ways in which American gun culture has really evolved and not for the best in the kind of shadows of the war on terror, the sense of being under siege, even when kind of statistical evidence will point that actually we're safer than we've probably ever been, right? That we don't see that message being communicated, in gun sales and or in their marketing. I think that it's, again, I could say a lot of things about this, but one thing that I kind of always come back to is that the role of violence in our society is changing. I think that violence has become really, for the right, the premier form of civic participation. That really, and this is part of the kind of authoritarianism, right? We don't want you to govern, but we do want you to harm. And the kind of a lot of things have been kind of refashioned with violence at the core. And yes, and things like being a gun owner, how that is so integral to people's identities, right? In a way that I do think is relatively novel, even within, say my lifetime. I grew up in South Dakota in an absolute gun owning home, but the gun culture I grew up in was literally nothing like the thing that exists today.
So where does this go? I mean, are we, you raise, I guess it's a, at least I don't know, you doff your cap. Maybe that's the wrong way of saying it, to Francis Fukuyama and the idea of the end of history on some level. But where does this trajectory take us? Or how much time do we have? I
always say that historians have very fuzzy crystal balls, right. But that and there are a bunch of different responses that are that are going to be required. And I should say I am not a political strategist by training, but it does seem to me that we are experiencing a crisis of governance, where people do not believe in the kind of faith of, they have no faith in the kind of government to deliver anything that is anything good for them. And that kind of leads us to this danger zone in terms of state fragmentation. And so, I mean, on the one hand, one thing we have to do is actually govern at all levels. And I think using far more means that are at people's disposal than the ones that kind of Democrats have been willing to use thus far. I know you've talked on the show before about kind of the Biden mansion show off, and that, Biden seems kind of just constitutionally unable to do, I think, what is required in this moment, because this isn't going to get better. This isn't going to get better just kind of by leaning into this notion that, oh, well, we're right and they're wrong. The facts will kind of, prove X, Y, or Z.
Is there a place in the world? I mean, if what we see with ISIS is in some ways a, sort of a reflection of what we're experiencing in terms of neoliberalism around the world on some level. Is there a place that's doing it well? I mean, is there a place where the people are, government is providing for us, that we can have faith in the functioning of our government, and there's always going to be disaffected people, but there's not enough to create an instability with our society.
I mean, yeah, I think, listen, we could certainly point to like certain European countries as doing a better job at this. You have places like Denmark that managed to vaccinate, say, just take that as your index, 90% of their population without any sort of mandates. What that displays is a very high level of kind of buy-in about the kind of force of government as a source of good, right? It's completely antithetical to the Ronald Reagan kind of, view of I'm from the government and I'm here to help as being the kind of scariest thing that one can hear. But right, even so, a lot of that comes, I don't want to glorify any of these kind of places because, right, there's a lot of like nativism that kind of comes with this. It's not like there's a kind of a perfect place that we can point to and say, they've got it right. But I think that we can, point to a kind of constellation of features, that we would want to see prevail within the United States that would give, an agenda that really is, built around serving the public good, as opposed to a kind of very small, class of private interests, right? A government structure that reflects that, right? Like a massive reform of kind of campaign finance and election laws, voting rights laws, in order to make sure that I think the actual will of the people on all of, on really points up and down the board is pretty clear. Even like these, like I always crack up, there's like the Fox News polls about like how popular, right? Essentially like the left agenda is. It's like, yes, we do want action on climate and universal health care. When you break these things down as a policy issues, they're actually very, very, very popular. And then we have to figure out then how is it that we can actually have a government that reflects the kind of will of the people. And I think the kind of longstanding approach, particularly from liberals, has been the assumption that the people are dumb, the people don't know what they want, and that if we can just have some sort of like technocratic or elite management that goes over their head, then that will be better for them. And I think that is a politics of failure that has led us precisely to where we are, and that we kind of, back to the end of history sort of stuff, we need to reject the fact that this is how history ends, and we need to be putting forward some real alternatives.
Suzanne Schneider, Deputy Director, Core Faculty at the Brooklyn Institute, author of The Apocalypse and the End of History, Modern Jihad and the Crisis of Liberalism. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
All right, folks. Going to head into the fun half, and joining us for the first time, 2022, Nomi Konst will be here. Just a reminder, your support makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. And also a reminder that if you want access to the fun half but cannot afford to do so, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Kyle reminds me that we have over 1,300 folks who over the years have needed our help in terms of membership. So when you become a member, if you are in a situation where you can afford to do so, you are helping those folks out too. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, don't forget, JustCoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY, get 10% off. Oh, there. Oh, Naomi, there you are. I had
I'm here.
Yeah, I had it on. I had my thing on a different view because Matt is.
You were just looking at yourself.
You had it on vanity mode.
Look.
No, I actually had it. I just had the letters. I just had a big display that said Matt Leck on it.
Oh.
Didn't see anybody. How are you? What's going on?
I gotta say, I'm really happy that Queer Eye for the Straight Guy came to your house. Emma and I had been working really hard for the makeover, and it happened. So wait for that show to come out, guys.
There you go.
That'd be a great, funny episode watching Sam squirm.
Well, thank you. Where did you get that 12-foot microphone?
It's not. It's just my table's a little higher today. This is the magic, guys. This is how it works. See, you guys keep it a secret. I show all the behind the scenes stuff. It's just a little closer.
It's right here. It looks. What's happening? Happy New Year.
You're like a little further. I could be like, Happy New Year. Happy 2022. What's happening? Today we're doing, we have a great interview with Harvey K to start off the new year, because Harvey and I have been like texting our fear for what's coming in 2022. And we wanted to start off by talking to folks about, we have been here before. Spoiler, not great. Maybe we should get ready and really let it sink in. Just how bad it could get.
Smedley Butler come up in that conversation?
No, it didn't, but maybe it will today.
Wasn't he approached for the coup? Wasn't Smedley Butler approached for the coup at one point against FDR? Am I right?
The business plot that the Bush family patriarchs were involved in. They said, hey, help us coup FDR. And he said, I'm not going to do that.
I'm not doing that, yeah. Interesting. I'll ask him. That's good.
I'm so psyched you're here today because there's a story about the, and I don't know that I have celebrated a failure of something more, but that would be the bipartisan redistricting commission in New York failing. I'm curious as to where you think New York State's going to go, because this is going to have implications in terms of maybe control of the Congress. We will talk about that in the fun half. But before we do, Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian media universe?
So hopefully this weekend we'll be recording for Literary Hangover our John Milton episode on Areopagitica, talking about free speech except for the papists. And also Left Reckoning will be back. Not a full show tomorrow night, but David and I will be doing a stream at the normal time, 8 o'clock Eastern. So Left Reckoning, check that out, folks.
What did I just? Are we streaming okay? I just got a message that the app is not working. Maybe we should check on that. All right. 646-257-3920. We'll be right back. We're gonna head into the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Oh. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
And back.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half of the program. We have some IMs. Sam, Happy New Year, or rather, that's what I would be saying if I hadn't been disappointed yet again by whoever puts together the first MR YouTube clips of the year. Every January, I look to see if the opening graphic to the clips will have the dial on the TV set turned to the proper year. Yesterday's clips had the dial tuned to 2021. Shake my damn head. I think someone needs to be sent home as an example. Either way, I really hope we can get it out in front of this for January 2023. On a wholly unrelated note, I'm getting evaluated for ADD next month. See you all in May. Tom from Yakubia. Do we have that? Do we have that updated thing, Matt?
I think we might. I'll get in touch with Dorsey.
Okay, see if we do. If not, let's try and reconnect. Maybe we should see if we can get like the next 5 years, but maybe we need to I don't know, mix it up a little bit. Although that dial is pretty helpful. Slam Brew, if Jimmy Dore was targeted by the CIA, did you know this?
What?
Were you aware, Nomi, that the CIA is out to get Jimmy Dore?
I thought he was the CIA. No. Of course I know. I'm the CIA and NATO, and that's what he says. So are you, Sam. You are our recruit.
I'm still being groomed.
I know. We haven't given you the badge yet.
This thing right here is like the first sign that I'm being groomed. They start putting on the soft glass.
Nerd.
They tell the DHS to send goons to his house like they did to YouTuber Second Thought. Also, it's crazy how the anti-vaccine narrative helps create material conditions that justify mandates and surveillance. I wonder if there's any connection between a data mining and surveillance company such as Palantir and guys like Eric Weinstein. I'm just asking questions. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some legitimate concerns over, sort of like the biometric, the mechanisms that are being developed to track and whatnot, without a doubt. Some do it in ways that are respectful of privacy, and others not so much. But all right, let's talk about this New York State thing, Nomi.
Mm-hmm.
I got it right here. Hold on. Here it is. Nope.
Which?
Where the heck did it go? I had it here. Well, the story.
Do you want me to send you a link? It's the one in the city.
Yeah, I know what the story was. I read the story, and basically the bipartisan commission, they don't think they can come to a resolution. They're going to send maps to the New York State Senate.
Assembly.
If the lawmakers cannot, here it is. Yep. If the lawmakers cannot resolve it, then it goes to some type of like ombudsman. I can't remember what they call it, to draw the maps. But the state Senate and the Assembly is going to vote, right? I mean, they're going to come up with something. It's a question of how many. Let me start with this. They can either there's 8 congressional districts that are represented by Republicans in New York State. They could eliminate a chunk of those, right? And is that consistent with also helping incumbents who are going to want to help themselves in terms of like their Senate districts and their assembly districts?
Are you really asking this question? Is this?
Well,
of course. I mean, I think this story is, I don't mean to say a non-story. Like a few people texted me, journalists texted me this today, asked for like a comment on it. And I was like, non-story, like everyone knows this. Everybody knew, I mean, in politics, I should say. And that is to me actually jarring that there's that much of a disconnect between the reporters covering this beat and what's actually happening in Albany, where everyone never assumed that there would be some sort of compromise with this bipartisan commission. I mean, this is a democratically controlled state. The Republicans are going to do all they can to voice any sort of protest, knowing very well there's probably some behind the scenes door they're gonna come up with some trade-off. Upstate Republican gets protected. They eliminate, they change Maliotakis's lines a little bit here. They protect Carolyn Maloney a little bit more here. Those are congressional districts in New York City. And then, of course, state senators, because the Senate, well, it's not as close as it used to be. And we're probably not going to have a blowout in New York like we did, that's why the IDC was so important, is that the Democrats always had the majority in the state. It's just the margins are much wider now. And so you find like a handful of senators that are more moderate in Long Island, and one just retired. So I think the writing is on the wall that incumbents will be protected in the Senate, but it is a far more progressive Senate than it used to be. So I don't think it's as concerning as it used to be.
Let me restate.
Yeah.
Is protecting state senators consistent with drawing lines so that you get less Republicans on a federal congressional level? In other words, is there a conflict between state redistricting and what I want as an outcome for federal redistricting, which would be virtually no Republican congresspeople? There's not going to be none, but we could go from, I think it's 8, right, Bradley, right now?
I think it's 8.
Down to how many? 3, 4? That's a big difference in a House where it's possible if Democrats were to maintain a majority, it would be, a 1 or 2 seat majority probably.
Right.
And so, eliminating 4, particularly with the redistricting that you got around the other places. But the thing that would inhibit that, it seems to me, would be if some state senators like, well, if I do that and that implicates my reelection chances, I'm not going to do that. And that's what I'm asking. Do you have a sense of whether eliminating Republican districts, as many as possible, is consistent with the best interests of state senators who are in office, because that's what they're going to pursue first anyways?
I think it's the case. I mean, first off, the Assembly has a very heavy hand on this. So that's a separate thing from the state Senate. Right now on the redistricting bipartisan commission, you do have some state senators who've already been very much part of this process. The deputy leader, my senator, Senator Janaris, he has been advocating and saying that, we have an opportunity in New York to have a more democratic state because of how the census has, could have been even more democratic if we had just, campaign on the census a little bit more, just like a little bit more, could have had one more seat. But the truth is that is something that he's been saying as the deputy leader of the state Senate, the political leader too, is that we have a great opportunity to gain a few seats in New York State. With that being said, Long Island, I'm really concerned that across the board, Democrats have just written off Long Island in a way that, like, I don't know. I mean, they didn't do great the last couple of times, but with that being said, like, Trump puts a lot of energy into Long Island. So I think they're just sort of thinking, whatever, Long Island will make sure that Swazi's district is more Republican. Potentially, that's, I think, what's going to happen. Swazi's a Democrat. Running for governor now as a conservative Democrat. And then, you have state senators in Long Island who are stepping down, like just, one's retiring. They had a blowout in this last election. No Democrats won in Long Island this last election. It's a bad year though, too. So just because, there's a historic trend doesn't mean that you give up on a location. So I think that might be their trade-off and some upstate seats. But what you said, I don't think it conflicts with necessarily the state Senate being more Democratic, because the state Senate are protecting itself at odds against the congressional, because it is a Democratic state Senate. It is much more Democratic than it was before. I think it's more about the congressional leaders wanting to protect their lines.
Right. Do the congressional districts in New York, do they align with lines that exist for state Senate, or is it a completely different
lines?
Set of lines?
Different lines. So for instance, Carol Maloney, who's my congresswoman, she has probably 4 state senators in her district: Liz Krueger, Senator Janaris.
Okay, but are those districts all exclusively in her congressional district, or do they share? Okay, so
So Janaris's district, my district, has AOC and Carolyn Maloney, and maybe even Grace May. No, I don't think so. I think it's just those 2.
All right. So
fun stuff, right?
Well, I mean, it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal, yeah. And this is the weeds. I mean, I think what we're going to see in 2022, and I hope what we're going to see in 2022 is, I think it's wonderful that people are running against bad Democrats, but this is like the New York Times reported a couple of weeks ago. I've been saying this on my show extensively. The Proud Boys are running in city councils and school boards now. And I think progressives, it's also much easier to win those. You don't have to raise as much money. It's much easier to win those races. I think we cannot rest on, frankly, even progressive organizations to build that pipeline. You just got to run. Like, if you feel it, just run. Like, that's where in my mind, that's where we are now. Don't wait for anybody to recruit you. Don't, depend on organizations. If you're running for city council in your town or town council or school board, you don't need masterminds and all the endorsements and to raise $250,000. It really is about being a community member running, and state Senate as well. I think it's New York's a little bit different, but in other states, I think there are real opportunities.
Good, folks. I want to hear about, people can text us, or I should say IM us, and let us know about their running for office.
Run against a Proud Boy.
So we have a new mayor. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Nomi. Eric is now the mayor. My daughter has already proclaimed that Eric Adams is doing a horrible job so far.
She's smart.
She's like, how the hell are we not taking a pause from school right now? And she's freaking out a little bit. Here is Eric Adams explaining that we need to protect people from the indignity of sleeping on the subways by ostensibly, I guess, arresting them.
Here's my plan for dealing with the subways right away. I need my police officers back on the subway trains, walking through the cars, having that omnipresent that's needed. Then let's be proactive. Let's partner our police officers with mental health professionals. Let's train the clerks and other TA employees to identify a person that's on the station or in the station that's acting irrationally, and let's proactively give them the services they need and have them off the system, because fear is not only actual, but it's perceived. There's a perception that our subway system is not safe. We need to remove that perception by having the presence of police and mental health professionals to make sure those who are on the services are getting the system that they need. There is no dignity in living on the train, sleeping on the train, or doing violent acts on the train station or on the train car. We're going to turn that around.
First off,
perception.
I mean, first off,
so much to say.
This is unbelievable to me. First off, the reason why people are afraid of subways in New York City, to the extent that people are, is because they don't want to catch COVID. Now, he doesn't believe that COVID is easy. He's basically announced that, like, we just need to deal with it. But that's the biggest thing that I think people are afraid of in terms of subways at this point. But what kind of services is he talking about? If people are living on the train, what kind of services might they need? Like maybe someplace to live. Yeah. I mean, this is... I'll tell you what I'm scared of. That state. Because that just sounds to me like he's just going to send.
That was exactly it. Is like the medium is the message, right? You got a former cop who is delivering a message that to put more cops in the subway. I feel more unsafe when I see more cops around because it creates this perception that it's not safe. We have more cops in New York City than than most countries have. We are so militarized in New York City. You can't walk outside your house without seeing, several cops on the street. It's ridiculous. We're also, let's be very clear, the safest city in America. And, despite a little bit of an uptick since COVID, we're still safer than we were 10 years ago and for decades beforehand. So just want to put those facts on the table. With that being said, like you said, is there a reason why he's saying this? Is it because he is funded by some police unions? Is it because he is funded by real estate? Is it because he said, he called out Goldman Sachs and Wall Street for not going back to
your internet. We're losing your internet for some reason.
Work and you need to leave the city. I'm sorry, that he's putting this out there, and it's going to hurt tourism. People are not going to feel comfortable here because there's this BS perception. Is my connection unstable?
Yeah, your connection's unstable, but I also was struck by how he says my cops. I'm going to put my cops back. What is he? Do that again. Will you run the first?
Here's my plan for dealing with the subways right away. I need my police officers back on the subway trains.
Yeah, I need my police officers. They're his police officers?
Well, he does lead them. And that's important. The mayor runs the police department.
I understand that, but it's not his police officers.
Well, you should take responsibility for them. Let's hold him to those words.
No, he's the mayor, and they're the city's police officers, but they're not his. I need my police officers back out there. No, I don't think. I'm sorry. I just the whole attitude I think is highly problematic, and the idea that they're going to assess who's acting irrationally on in the subway. That's a lot of people, as far as I'm concerned.
Well. One more thing, and also what defines rational. These are not mental health experts, no matter how much they're put in situations in which there are mental health problems, and simultaneously, we could talk about all the things we could be doing in terms of mental health. Perhaps passing the New York Health Act would be great, going back to the Senate. But what really gets me about this is that there is this perception that New York has changed and New York is more conservative than people think because of Eric Adams. Let's be real. This man ran in the lowest turnout election in history in New York City in a multi-way primary, ranked choice primary. He did not have an overwhelming consensus behind him. This was a slice and dice targeted election, and he benefited because of a lot of the conservative news that was putting out that New York is not safe. So they're going to play this game, trying to create, a message that we're not a safe city, and we are. Historically, the trends are in that direction.
Yeah, this is going to be. I'm not looking forward to this guy's era, frankly, because. All right. Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about him more. Let's go down to Florida, where it's fascinating in New York that we have the governor of the state saying we're in crisis mode, and we have the mayor of the biggest city in the state where we have the highest incidence of COVID saying no bigs. Seems nuts to me. Florida, I just don't understand at this point, what is behind the conservative ideology of testing being bad? Why would you have a problem with testing at this point? Here is the Florida Surgeon General, Joseph Ladapo.
We're going to be working to unwind the sort of testing psychology that our federal leadership has managed to, unfortunately, get most of the country in over the last 2 years. We need to unwind this testing sort of planning and living one's life around testing. Without it, we're going to be sort of stuck in the same cycle. So, it's really time for people to be living, to, to make the decisions they want regarding vaccination, to enjoy the fact that many people have natural immunity.
What? Early treatment saves lives, guys. How do you get early treated if you don't know if you have COVID? Just curious.
It's insane.
Is this guy actually a doctor? Can't he lose his license for this kind of malpractice?
I don't understand. Are we misinterpreting it, Bradley? Is he saying, like, we need more testing? He can't be saying, is he? No? This whole thing where you test. Why I say, chances are, well, I don't know if we wouldn't be doing this show, but maybe not. If it wasn't for Bradley testing, the people coming to his house on New Year's, they tested positive and they said, get out. He said, get out.
Oh my God.
I will tell you, I just literally this moment got notice because of testing. My daughter has been spared going to see her friend who, by all accounts, could be positive because that person's family member just tested positive. I mean,
another upside of testing is if you work at a place like a department store or something, and you test positive, you submit that test to HR, and you get COVID days from especially major corporations. So that's another benefit of testing that maybe the bosses wouldn't want you to get tested so much.
Matt, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, I was going to say, like, if it wasn't for testing, Matt, you'd be in this office. But then, of course, then I would be exposed. And so I have to figure out something different now.
What I don't understand is, okay, so they don't want masks, they don't want vaccines, and they don't want tests.
Well, now you have a choice. Vaccines. It's your personal choice.
Okay, so it's, but then they're going to say too many vaccines, guys. I'm curious what kind of doctor this guy is. Is he a chiropractor?
We need to unwind this whole mentality of getting vaccinated or testing or wearing masks. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. I mean, I just like it's. I just feel like this experiment, it's over. This whole
human
thing.
Race.
Yeah, this.
Yeah, I'm there.
Oh, okay. Now, when was? This was back in September. Florida's new Surgeon General opposes mandates, calls COVID-19 vaccine nothing special.
Oh God. What kind of doctor is he?
He's a Florida doctor.
Oh, you know what I was going to say? The vaccines are nothing special because Trump started to embrace the vaccines, and DeSantis wants to run against Trump, and therefore the vaccines can't be magic now because DeSantis is going to run against Trump. I mean, this is just...
Maybe he runs with him.
It's just nuts. You mean the Surgeon General does?
No, I meant DeSantis with Trump. I don't feel like they're actually going to run against each other.
You may be right. But
I'd be impressed. I agree with Nomi. I'd be impressed if DeSantis has the appetite for that, because I think Trump would knock him out like little Marco.
Yeah. Tiny DeSantis.
Marco. Is Marco still around? What is he doing on the data?
We're going to see. He's getting ready for that. His race is going to be an important race, I think, in terms of 2022. All right. Well, since we just brought up the fact that Donald Trump has embraced vaccines. I think before the break, was it before the break, Bradley? We played that clip of Donald Trump with Candace. Okay. So I think everybody's seen this where Candace Owens like, we shouldn't get vaccinated. No, I got boosted and we should all get vaccinated. And she was like, but it doesn't really work. No, it works. That was pretty funny. But now there's a problem because how do you, if you're Candace Owens, like how do you sort of maneuver this situation where Donald Trump basically killed your buzz, essentially, as it were. Here is Candace Owen. This was the next day where she was trying to sort of like dig herself out of a hole.
Are good, and he believes that because he comes from a generation, like people, you oftentimes forget like how old Trump is. He comes from a generation, I've seen other people that are older have the exact same perspective. Like they came from a time before TV, before internet, before being able to conduct their independent research, you know, and everything that they read in a newspaper that was pitched to them, like they believed that that was a reality. And one of those things was, you know, this push for vaccines and believing that people were going to die without vaccines. And so I believe that his support of the vaccine is genuine and it's not based in any corruption at all. I think he actually believes those things. And people that are saying, how is he ignoring all the people that are being injured? And, you know, people are sending Rumble videos and all of these, you know, websites, obscure websites. I believe also that he only reads the mainstream media news. Believe it or not, I do not believe that Trump reads or partakes in any other news sources. You know, I don't believe that Trump is on the internet or, you know, that he necessarily uses like, you know, the web to try to find, you know, obscure websites. I think that he just relies on, you know, typical mainstream sources. So I don't think that there's anything evil going on there. I just wanted to say that because so many donors, supporters of his are kind of like questioning where all of this is coming from. And I think he just genuinely believes that. And he needs to sit down and, you know, have a full conversation with someone. I was interviewing him in that circumstance, but he needs to have a larger conversation to really understand what's going on and why so many people are just horrified.
I am so speechless. The argument is that the former president of the United States, as much of it as an idiot, I will concede he's a moron, and there's no doubt in my mind that he doesn't read anything other than the pictures that people, you know, print out from the internet and hand him. He listens to, you know, only to right-wing talk radio. But the idea that he has been captured by this sort of like old-fashioned thought that vaccines are good because he doesn't have access to internet websites.
No, obscure websites, Sam. Obscure websites.
Tell him the truth about vaccines. Now, remember, she's not just talking about COVID now. She's talking about like the polio vaccine. She's talking about like all sort of like all the vaccines. The reason why people thought measles, the reason why people thought they worked is because all they had was TV and newspapers and paper. And, you know, people would like write reports on paper. You couldn't see websites. And
she's running against him. She's running against him.
I guess presumably all of the people who are associated with the medical, you know, like with the government, nobody got into Trump and told him the real truth about vaccines. This is unbelievable. And isn't she on the Daily Wire? Does Ben Shapiro also believe that the reason why people think vaccines are good is because they're old and they don't have access to the internet?
Well, Ben's actually been relative to all these freaks better about vaccines, but
that's what I mean.
Yeah,
this is enterprise, and he's out there basically hosting and employing people who are going online and telling. I would imagine that video that she did there got hundreds, maybe millions of views, saying like anybody who believes that vaccines are helpful, any vaccine are helpful, it's because they don't have access to the internet. And they can't see these websites that we can see that say the vaccines are not helpful.
You're saying I'm too basic to know that your anti-vax lunacy is true? I've actually been around for a long time. Trump actually has Breitbart printed out for him, so that was news during 2017. So I think Candace is wrong here.
Well, I mean, the crazy part of that is so Ben Shapiro wants both of those audiences. He wants the Candace Owens, you know, base, and he wants everything is a business opportunity for them. And Trump got in trouble. And so he has to go on stage with Bill O'Reilly in front of 5 people in an auditorium and say vaccines matter.
Yep. But also, I didn't have the internet growing up, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Alex Jones, on the other hand, he's a lot less slippery about it when he explained why Donald Trump supported the vaccines. It's really just one of two choices. And Alex Jones lays it out right here.
Is an emergency Christmas Day warning to President Trump. You are either completely ignorant. Is an emergency Christmas Day warning to President Trump. You are either completely ignorant about the so-called vaccine gene therapy that you helped ram through with Operation Warp Speed, or you're one of the most evil men who has ever lived to push this toxic poison on the public and to attack your constituents when they simply try to save their lives and the lives of others. We're about to lay out the basic, incontrovertible facts that what you told Candace Owens just a few days ago is nothing but a raft of dirty lies.
And yet more people have
dirty lies.
I have a theory.
No, please, go ahead.
I think they're turning on him. I really do. I think they're turning on him. I think that they're trying to set the stage for somebody else because at the end of the day, like, they don't think that they have it. I don't know. I mean, they've been taking over the election commissions. They've been doing this warfare here and there. But at the end of the day, I don't think Trump is going to run. And so they're just preparing for that.
And Dave Rubin moved to Florida. He got the message from DeSantis. So all things are go for Operation DeSantis, I think. I mean, that's a good theory if Trump doesn't run.
I think they're definitely. I don't think there's any hard decisions being made. I think people are just sort of like hedging their bets. There's just they're getting out there and they're protecting themselves. But it is possible that Donald Trump ends up being a lizard, and if mea culpa that I didn't see that before.
What was the operation? Operation vaccine gene therapy or whatever?
Gene therapy operation. And aside from the fact that I really have anyone who coming to my Christmas celebration this year, that is why I'm in the studio doing this. That's why I'm here.
His wife got arrested too, right?
Christmas. Yes, my wife will not be attending Christmas this day. A special Christmas warning. It turns out either you're just ignorant or you're the most evil human being on the planet. Sorry about promoting you for president.
That's a hell of a knife edge.
My bad, yes. It's one of two things. Oh, boy.
Oh, my God. These people. Do you watch Succession?
I do.
Then you know that they sit around picking who the next guy is.
Yeah, well, I've seen
they
that.
They have their little conference, and they did it over Zoom.
I like using words incontrovertible on Alex Jones's show.
Really incontrovertible. Helen, are you keeping your sexy beard? I don't know if I've decided yet. Juicy on the IM, keep the beard. Neutro rhino reality is best. First, the clear glasses. What's the next step for becoming Glenn Beck after being revealed as secretly conservative by the January 6th papers? Are we going to see chalkboards with hand-drawn illustrations? Did you hear about that?
No.
That Bernie Kerik thing?
No, what happened? The former commissioner or NYPD, yeah.
Bernie Kerik had a document that he prepared for Giuliani, January 6th. They outlined their whole plan, their whole media plan. Then they outlined the top conservative social media influencers. And I was what, number 11 or 12?
Oh, really?
Yeah, here it is. Look at, zoom in on that. Zoom in on that, Bradley.
Oh my God.
Look at number 10.
Wow. Wait, so what were they supposed to do? Basically unleash some trolls against you to...
No, I'm listed with all the conservatives.
With the conservatives, not the influencers. Okay, I get what you're saying. And 2 Greeks compiled this too. I'm really embarrassed.
Between the 101 and the 5, amazing interview. Thanks, MR Crew. Left is best. Recursive snowflakery. Masks keep your face warm. You know what? It's true. When I walk down, I drop off my kid at school, I usually would just take my mask and put it in my pocket, but now I keep it like down here. I keep it because it's so cold out. It helps. Sun's out, guns out. Silver Fox. Sam's beard crumbs. Please keep the beard, Sam. It really suits you. Also, love the new glasses. Brooklyn Sue. I hate to simp, but can't get enough of this new look, Sam. Maybe taking more walks through Prospect Park in hopes of a sighting. I'll be the one in the mask muttering about the end of the world. Left-handed stranger. Happy New Year. The beard is awesome. I agree with Saul. You should keep it. I got COVID. 21 people at my workplace are out. Last week it was 16 people. Lucky me and my wife have 2 Pfizers. We were planning on getting our booster in January, but we got sick first. It will be okay, but it does suck. I can only imagine how much worse I would have felt if I had been vaxxed. At least HEB's curbside is free for the time being, so we don't have to go in. My stomach muscles hurt from coughing so damn much. Not being sick is best. On another note, what if you said Charlie Beta Delta instead of Sebede? I don't know, just a thought. That's interesting. True North Politics. Zaddy Sam coming on looking like Dr. Fantastic. Will Trump's comments about vaccines on Candace's own show tip the scale in terms of midterms and a future run for president? Seems like that was a mistake in terms of maintaining his base. I don't think they care. Do you think they care?
Trump can get him back. If he runs, he's daddy.
Helena, will 2022 be the year Donald Trump goes to court for rape and sexual assaults? Wasn't Gloria Allred involved in representing many of the women? I don't know what's up with that.
No, but Ivanka and Don Jr. were subpoenaed.
On that civil fraud case.
On this, exactly.
Middle class Mindy and the gypsy problem. First, what the hell is up with your face? Second, tidy that up if you want to retain your status as one of the top 10 conservative influencers in the country.
How did I miss this? Oh my God.
Matthew,
well, that's how bad they are too, though. Like, they're so inept. They're spending so much money on whoever it is that compiled this list, and they couldn't even double check.
That's amazing to me.
Incredible.
Matthew of Philadelphia. Any update from Kyle on Project Mothra? Nightmare blunt rotation. I miss Emma, but Sam's beard is keeping me company for the time being. Pet friend. Hey, Sammy, they say that having a beard improves woodworking skills. Plus, why spend time shaving when you can be using that time to make wood shavings with some nice planes and chisels? Deep POV. Absolutely loving the beard, especially with the gray sweater. Even though you remind me of a young Noam Chomsky without the beard, I vote to keep it. Loved hearing that you plant trees. Do you do that here in Brooklyn? No, I do that upstate. Left of the box. What's everyone's New Year's resolution?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm doing dry January, which I do every January. That's not really a resolution. It's just got my kombucha right here. It's great.
That's not dry. That's
no, this one is. There's a hard one, and this one's totally 0%. All right. Yeah.
Do you guys have any Bradley, Matt?
Mine is I'll be writing something.
Nice.
Wow. Bradley?
Probably like finish more stuff, like finish more. I watch a lot of movies and shows and books and I just don't finish them. So I just want to actually like complete stuff that I like, media that I consume.
Sort of feels like you didn't even finish that New Year's resolution.
And eat more whitefish.
Okay.
Whitefish.
Sam's sexy beard. As an arm of the conservative influencer machine, you will give an unconstitutional subpoena to testify in Congress. Is there January 6th scam, or you hold strong like a true patriot? I'll go testify. Kid tested. Politburo approved. After door staggering revelations, I came up with a new ad read for you, Sam. Speaking of keeping your privates clean, have you ever sat up late night worried about the stability of the Middle East and the impact of our rogue actors on our global economy and corporate welfare? Well, know that there are patriotic professionals at the CIA standing tall for the first line of defense of the United States and their interests abroad. Okay, I'm not going to read that whole thing. Leftist scum. Looking good, Sam. I'll be in your DM shortly. Joe Snuffy, before you change the date, I was going to recommend that you keep the beard until the live show and shave it off live on stage. But moving the date back is no reason not to do that. So I say, keep the beard. Man, it's unbelievable. Haven't I had a beard before?
Maybe like one day.
You had last year during I remember.
I feel like.
And then I thought, if I can say, you said that you got rid of it because you thought the MSNBC women liked, no, I'm kidding. Liked it without the beard.
Sam from Ottawa. Every policy debate with a conservative needs to be prefaced with what's the end goal? From the left, most policies' ultimate goal is to help people. From the right, the ultimate goal is to help capitalism. This isn't made black and white nearly enough. Oliver Wendell Holmes slice. I'm really digging the Rabbi Sam Seder look. Left fossil tub. Pete Perlman. Fascists can't tolerate the lack of control over everything and everyone. What drives them is their own terror of themselves. Interesting. Let's talk about this. I mean, I'm literally getting texts now of different people who have been tested positive.
Ooh.
Heard from a listener who was positive. They had 2 vaccine shots. I think they hadn't gotten their booster. Their ribs hurt from coughing. Hopefully there'll be no long-term implications, but that happens. We don't know exactly, what the data. I've seen anywhere from 10% to 30% of long COVID, but we really don't have hard and fast data on this because we don't keep data very well in this country, and we're still in the midst of this thing. But you should know there are people in the media who believe this is all just something like people are doing this and basically pretending there's a real pandemic going on because they want to. I give you Tucker Carlson and Glenn Greenwald from Fox News.
Glenn Greenwald has been covering authoritarianism and American politics for many years, and we thought that made him the perfect person to assess COVID policy in the first days of a new year. Glenn Greenwald joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. Do you think these superstitions can continue?
Whoa.
It's really remarkable how so long into the universal availability of COVID vaccines, which we were constantly told we were supposed to celebrate and even venerate, that it was the way out of the pandemic, everybody can get vaccines if they want, there's increasing calls for even greater repression on our lives, greater calls for vesting the state with more and more power. Why would that be? I think fear is an extremely powerful human motivator, and demagogues in government know how to stimulate it for their own power. But I also think that with social media, the more people are constantly feeding on stories about how they should be frightened, the more this fear is intensifying. And I think there's almost like an addiction, Tucker, to being protected by the state, to not having to return to normal life. There's a desire for the pandemic to continue, even.
What are we talking about when we say return to normal life, right? Let's put this like clear. Now, in general, I agree that their society, whether it's the media or our government, will overhype fears in certain instances, without a doubt. But we know for a fact that hospitalizations are increasing in, let's say, in New York City. We know this for a fact. We also know, sadly, that it's there are a big increase in pediatric hospitalization. Now, the problem here with that is at one point you run out of beds. That is a legitimate concern. But what does getting back to normal mean in this instance? What does it mean? It means go back to work. That is why the Koch brothers, the Koch network, has poured so much money into anti-COVID, anti-pandemic movements, because they want people back to work. That's what's going on here.
But what I don't understand is the solution for going back to work. Like what Glenn is saying makes a lot of sense if you weren't on Tucker Carlson and if you were advocating for people to take the vaccine. This is the dilemma here. You want to end the pandemic? Take the vaccine. And he's become, I'd like to know, has Glenn Greenwald taken the vaccine? Have any of these people who are now saying that the vaccine is oppressive?
Yeah, he has. He's said, he's on Twitter saying, like, I am a pro-vaccine person. And he's saying that if you believe in the vaccine, you would go back to normal now that people are vaccinated. I guess assuming that everyone's vaccinated.
Well, but
then what is oppressive? This is what I want to know, because they keep saying something is oppressive, but what I hear from these folks, from the people on the right, is what's oppressive is the vaccine. So what is oppressive to Glenn?
This gives him both. This gives him both, right? Because if you say that we were told the vaccines were going to end the pandemic, and I think a lot of people thought it would. People didn't think that there would be a variant that could escape the vaccine. I mean, I think there are obviously some epidemiologists and some people did, but broadly speaking, I think there was a sense that the vaccine, like what it's done for like measles and stuff like that, would largely eliminate it. Now, it has diminished the implications of it in terms of like death. And it may have diminished the implications in terms of long COVID and make it into just a sickness. But there's a lot of unvaccinated people out there, and it can be transmitted still. So it's still highly problematic. But by saying, by hyping and being so flamboyant about the idea of like, they said it was going to stop the vaccine and blah, blah, blah. They stopped the pandemic and they overpromised and there was such hyperbole about the vaccine. You're discrediting the vaccine. So you can both say, I'm taking the vaccine, I am pro-vaccine, but also this vaccine is dubious. And then he goes, okay, the oppression that is coming from our government. Like, and I don't know, maybe he's talking about like what's going on in Australia or New Zealand or somewhere else. But ostensibly, you know, you go on Tucker Carlson's for an American audience. If you're not saying it, I think it's understood that the oppression must be happening in this country. And I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it in context, Fauci came out and shortened the sick period because basically the Delta CEO said we need to get planes off the ground. Right? Like, that's the thing. That's what it is.
Exactly. We need to get people, we need to make more money.
Except the Koch brothers, if they want to make money, they should be pushing for for people to take the vaccine, because the only reason, as we know, and in fact, we have to say this over and over, is because people are not getting vaccinated. These variants are spreading. And this is what's happening. You want people to be safe in the workplace and want to go to work. So, I mean, you've already lobbied to protect yourself legally. But if you want people to feel safe and go to work because they still have the choice, because it's still the United States, then advocate for the vaccine. It's the Fox News audience that wants to spread it out.
I don't think that is actually the logical choice by the Koch brothers, because I think they realize, or whoever's funding these things, or I mean, if you go to a place where there is a low vaccination rate, you're not going to see people hiding and afraid to go out. They're going out and living their lives as if there is no pandemic. Now, eventually, some of them, like that woman, that woman who ran in California, what's her name?
The former DA of Orange County. Yeah.
She went to Turning Points USA, spoke out against vaccine mandates. She's dead now at age 46 of COVID. Some of them are going to die. Most people won't. That's what they're banking on. No.
But this is the thing. It's actually it's a bad investment, Koch brother. It is because the problem is that the workplaces are shutting down because of these idiots. Some of them might show up to work, but they're working with other people who do not want to work under conditions. And there's vax mandates on top of it in those workplaces.
Really a bad investment, because I think that if you can convince people that there's a certain segment of the population that's going to die, and it doesn't matter. Just go live your life. Maybe you get sick, maybe you don't. Doesn't matter, but you won't get that sick. And the people who die, they got it coming to them because they have comorbidities or they're super old. I think that's actually an easier sell than to convince these people who are already, in la land that, in fact, no, you should have faith in these systems. No, I think, and it's also more than just a twofer, but the dynamic is there. It is very much to the benefit of libertarians like Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson, who both have had their libertarian past and weave in and out of it, to sow distrust against government in collectivism and the idea that we're a society and that we're interconnected, it's a twofer. It's not just that I'm going to get people back to work and I'm going to get the airlines flying again and I'm going to get the restaurants open, supposedly, in certain areas. It's also, this is going to pay dividends down the road, this distrust in government.
And it's a smart bet because vaccines are really important, and absolutely those people should be way more clear about their vaccine positions. But we aren't going to do the things on top of vaccines like testing and tracing that really needs to be done to stop something like Omicron. So they're just going to monetize that thing. Like, I thought the vaccines were supposed to work, right? Like that, getting both sides of that. If they we can get like we said at the beginning, where it's if Omicron is going, I guess the vaccines don't work, right? Like that's implicit in that position, that pro-vax anti-mandate position, I think.
Go back a little bit and keep playing this. It's interesting. Full-on libertarianism here.
Has anybody asked him if he's left? Directly?
About how they should be frightened, the more this fear is intensifying. And I think there's almost like an addiction, Tucker, to being protected by the state, to not having to return to normal life. There's a desire for the pandemic to continue, even though the acute dangers have long since passed as a result of numerous factors, including a less threatening variant and the availability of natural immunity and vaccines. And it's really disturbing to see how the repression is increasing even as the threat decreases.
There is
up there. What repression? What repression is involved in what's going on here in this country? Like
this draconian commands.
What repression? This is just bizarre. And I would add, not only the repression, like the idea that like we need government to protect, government to protect us, like what? Like OSHA? Yeah. Like OSHA laws? Like what are we talking about here? This is an attack not just on whatever the repressive of, I don't know what the repressive, I guess the vaccine mandate that is in the military, which has existed for, for military personnel on a bunch of other vaccines. We've never heard Glenn Greenwald talk about that in the past. But what other protections are we supposed to not be addicted to that government gives us?
Yeah, you know what one we're not talking about is Title 42. It'd be interesting if Glenn brought up the Title 42 expansion using bullshit, the Trump's bullshit virus to close the border. That's never brought up on Tucker. I'd be curious to see that discussion. It'd be interesting from a libertarian against authoritarianism.
If they hate authoritarianism, why don't we talk about all the black men who get murdered all the time by the police? I've never heard Glenn Greenwald or Tucker Carlson talk about that.
Plus,
hate the state. What's the state? The definition of the state is defined by borders and military. They hate the state so much.
All right, continue.
Every day in the news of the increasing militarization of our response to this COVID pandemic. So you just saw the governor of Connecticut call up the National Guard to distribute COVID supplies. The mayor of Washington just got full control of the National Guard of Washington. Congressman from Texas was calling for FEMA to get involved in all of this stuff. Should that make us nervous? Is it paranoid to think, wait a second, what the hell's going on? How do you read those developments?
I would really encourage people to go use Google and go back to the debate right after the 9/11 attack, when all of these radical proposals were introduced to increase power in the hands of the government, like the Patriot Act. And the argument at the time was, oh, don't worry, these are temporary measures. They're only going to be in place for as long as is necessary to get this crisis, this emergency, under control. 20 years later, the Patriot Act is very much in place. Every 4 years, it's renewed without any opposition. Its uses and application have wildly expanded beyond its original intention. It's almost never used for terrorism. It's used for a whole variety of other means for the government to spy on its citizenry. When you start building these bureaucratic apparatuses that vest power in the hands of the state to control the lives of citizens in the name of some temporary crisis, it never is temporary. It never goes away. There's never a political motive to dismantle it. It will just continue. And even if there's a cure tomorrow for COVID, they'll just transform it into the Office of Infectious Diseases or the Administrator of Public Health. And these powers, once vested, are going to be very difficult to put in the hands of government.
Yeah, They call you paranoid, then give you every cause for paranoia. I notice. Glenn Greenwald, thank you for being a rational voice.
Yeah,
thank you, Tucker.
Yeah. Rational.
Well, first off, this Glenn's pushing of Google is disgusting to me. I hope he's their monopolistic practices and how they're evil when they don't serve his interests. But putting that aside, he's obviously awash in Google money. But how does calling in FEMA to help with a pandemic, or how does having the National Guard distribute vaccines and tests, how does that create a new apparatus? In fact, that's exactly what you would want, something that is completely ad hoc. It's completely the opposite of what he's suggesting is happening. I agree with what he said about the war on terror, but to make this about to make that analogy, I think is insane.
Well, what's disingenuous about this is somebody, let's just pull it back for a second. Let's not forget, this is somebody and many of his colleagues who supported Bernie Sanders, who never said that we should put less money in government. It was always about dispersing whatever sort of material goods we can as a society through our government to help people, and giving out vaccines for free, not charging them, and tests for free is an issue of public health to make sure that society functions. So I'm curious why he's taking a very right-wing libertarian approach when supposedly this is somebody who supported Bernie Sanders and his ideas to make sure that the rich are taxed more so that we can pay for government, and making sure that society's safe and that the well-being of everybody is just as important as the wealthiest. I don't understand where he took this turn. Just curious, when did that happen?
He took it with Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
And Tulsi Gabbard. Okay, interesting. Okay. How does she feel about vaccines? Have we asked?
I don't know about vaccines, but she thinks a single payer is un-American. So.
By the way, that according to chat, that Texas congressman who wanted to call in FEMA was Dan Crenshaw. So I guess Tucker didn't want to say his name.
Interesting.
That's pretty funny.
Also, isn't he anti-Bolsonaro? This is very similar to Bolsonaro's talking points.
Give him some time. Here is, this is just too good. This is just too funny. I don't really have any comments about this. This happened at the Turning Points USA. This happened December 20th, and missed it at the end of last year. Here is, you've got, James O'Keefe wearing a flak jacket on a massive stage, bringing out so-called whistleblowers from major media outlets. I have no idea what's going on here, but this is honestly, if you're going to do the movie about America turning into this sort of like Hunger Games style, despotic future for America, this would be a scene that you would write. Play this.
Carrie Porch, CNN whistleblower. Come on out. Come on, Carrie.
Oh my God.
April Moss, CBS News, blew the whistle on CBS News. Come on, April.
Not of CBS News. She blew the whistle on them.
And
A little
suddenly
bit
there
faster,
are
please.
100
Thank you.
and more muckrakers and whistleblowers manifest. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends
Oh my
towards
God.
justice.
Oh my God.
These brave souls are the fuel that has given me hope. We may die doing what we do, or lose our livelihoods
Wow,
for the
guys.
noble fight. But that is all we could ask for, to die on our feet.
Your feet, rather than live on our knees.
Whoa. Has the Weeknd sued them yet? God.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
What?
When at any other time has James O'Keefe had to wear a flak jacket with president?
In the wars against CBS, Sam, right? They have so much money. They couldn't have at least had choreography. Like, it was almost there. If they had just had some sort of like West Side Story routine, it was almost there. There was square dancing on stage. He couldn't have written a rap. Like,
Completely. I mean, I can't even get over this. It's so insane.
you should do a parody of this at your live show.
I'll tell you, and that's why we spent like a week like talking like we could do this. Would people know what we were talking about? And I'm like, I can't even get close to the production value of this, but that would have been actually pretty great because I just done the whole show that way. We wouldn't even like just an hour and a half of us sort of dancing that way would have been. It's completely nuts. All right, let's just do this one segment, this clip from Laura Ingraham's show, because on Thursday, Donald Trump is going to give a commemorative speech about January 6th. Do you understand like what is he doing?
It's in Arizona. Everything's in Arizona. That was in Arizona. They're like really investing in turning Arizona, Trump country again.
Here is Laura Ingraham on with Jim Jordan. You all remember Jim Jordan. He is the Republican congressman who, when he was an assistant wrestling coach and had been warned by multiple players that they were having, I think it was a medical person on the associated with the team was molesting players. He completely ignored it. Now, this is just the testimony from the players as adults, so we don't know this for a fact. We just know it based upon the testimony, the public testimony of players who went to him. So here's Jim Jordan with Laura Ingraham. And Jim Banks, I should say.
Congressman Banks, related to this somewhat, President Trump has decided to do a rally on January 6th. Given all the emotion and the lies about what happened and what did happen criminally, and some things were horrific that happened and shouldn't have happened that day, is it smart for President Trump to do a rally on that particular day versus next week or the week before?
I welcome it. President Trump has important things to say on Thursday, on January 6th, and like everybody, like so many others, I'm looking forward to hearing what President Trump has to say. Now, just like Jim Jordan said, Democrats fear nothing more than the truth, and that's why Nancy Pelosi kicked Jim Jordan and I off of the January 6th committee, because we were already asking questions that Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to answer. We don't know why she's trying to cover up many of the facts about what happened on January 6th, but we know that she's trying to cover it up. She's covering up the truth. And I know President Trump has important things to say about what happened that day. Jim Jordan and I and other Republicans are still at work conducting interviews with Capitol Police officers and others to try to get to the truth. And we're going to expose the truth along the way that shows that Nancy Pelosi and Democrats were involved in the negligence that led to the disaster that happened a year ago on January 6th. If we're serious about making sure that another January 6th never happens again, then we need to answer these important questions about the systemic breakdown of.
Why doesn't he just say it? What is she hiding if he knows? Was the QAnon guy Nancy Pelosi's intern?
Can't say it quite yet. Can't say it. It was a systemic breakdown that they were part and parcel of the negligence associated with that.
Unbelievable. So I saw this sign. Have you seen this like Blue Lives Matter sign? The blue line? Can you hear me?
The blue with the black?
Right. But there's at the bottom, it says asterisk, except for the Capitol Police.
Oh my God. Well, so what do you think Trump is going to do here?
I mean, I don't know what his end game is, but I think this is about bringing, I mean, there was a huge Arizona. I think they might have the largest like number of QAnon supporters in Arizona. And I think he's just appealing directly to the QAnon, far right. That's it. It's just all he knows how to do is speak to his base and get them excited, which is dangerous because, as you said, he's probably going to ask them to all run for local office. And, that's his deal with Republicans.
Are they trying to focus on Mark Kelly? Is that what's going on there? Because I sort of feel like I don't feel like Mark Kelly is in too much danger of losing. Do you?
I don't know if it's about just the Senate as much as it is locally. Like the ground is shifting a lot, and locally it's shifting. I could be wrong, but they're investing in pipeline right now, and we're not. And they're thinking 5-10 years in advance. So. Or it's just Trump. Maybe he just wants to go somewhere where he knows he can pull a crowd because he didn't pull it with Bill O'Reilly in Florida. I don't know.
And it's warm.
And it's no, but it's also a distraction because keep in mind, he knows that everybody else is going to be talking about January 6th. So he's doing exactly what he used to do during the campaign, holds a rally, pulls some of the attention back to him.
Yep. It'll be interesting. Jenna Tolles. Sam, really enjoyed the interview today. Super informative. Thank you. Was it a deliberate decision to become a thirst trap with the new look?
Oh, God. I told you.
Also, that was a joke username.
Oh, wait, what?
Jenna
Tolles. Jenna Tolles.
I don't get it.
Say it 3 times fast.
Oh, okay. I got you. Pennsatucky, Mike, just a thought regarding today's guest. Matt Chrisman from Chapo has in the past defined fascism as the application of colonial methods of control upon one's own population. Come shower with Crowder. Eamon Animations finally released Punished Bernie. Rack up those likes, views, and subs for this talented animator. It's great. Yeah, that was amazing. Tom Cruise. Sam, I keep seeing people implying that Omicron could lead to the end of pandemic. I guess the logic is that everyone will get it, get some natural immunity, and effectively be somewhat safe from reinfection. But it seems just as likely that with all these infections, there'll be a new variant, possibly just as infectious and more deadly vaccine resistant. Is there any hope for the end scenario? I don't know if there are epidemiologists who have commented on this or I'm just seeing propaganda.
I've seen epidemiologists talk about it.
I think it's possible, but it's also possible that there might be another variant. I mean, I think this is the thing. We don't know. There's just not a lot of there's only so much modeling you can do with global pandemics because of the fact that there hasn't been that many global pandemics in our lifetime, unless you're like 100 and I don't know, several hundred years old. Is this me? I remember after Sandy Hook, a co-worker's father felt the need to hurriedly buy another AR-15 because Obama was going to take his guns away. I asked how many guns can he use to protect his freedoms at one time. She shrugged. Elon's pungent Musk. Anyone who says that the government should be run as a business and thinks it's not being run like a business already has obviously never worked in a corporate environment already. There's tons of people who don't deserve executive level jobs that just know somebody jobs made up for someone, and tons of waste in corporations. They spend all their time trying to go lean at lower levels while ignoring that a lot of the waste is at their level. These are the worst parts of corporate that get brought into government and what needs to change about the government. Warren from Toronto. Happy New Year. Stay safe, everyone. I caught Omicron over the break, but I'm good now. Sadly, boosters were just available a week before, and I couldn't get an appointment. Had a brutal 2 days, followed by what felt like a bad cold for a few days. My entire health unit was on vacation, so there was little to no contact tracing done. As we enter lockdown, I think we're in for a rough month. Haven't felt this low since our last lockdown. Take care of yourselves.
So just to be clear, if you get Omicron, you can't get the booster or any, I guess Delta as well, but more likely Omicron because you're not going to get through Delta probably. Are you unable to get the booster right away?
Right away?
Or at all?
I think they tell you to hold off for a little bit.
Okay.
Turkey Day. Did you see the story about people being stuck on 95 South in Virginia over 24 hours at this point? Yes. And I heard Tim Kaine is one of them.
And Mika Bridget, or not Mika Bridget, the other one, Joe, Morning Joe, Scarborough.
We got to tie this into the Build Back Better failure tomorrow, I think. Yeah. Just unbelievable embarrassment.
Mike's Pillow's crack pipe. Sam is insanely distracting with that beard. How dare you look so fine, sir? It's bizarre. Brave, Emma, and Nomi. This is from my sister, apparently. Betsy and I, that's my other sister, have been fantasizing about a Sam Seder episode of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy.
You can join in. We can all, everybody write to Queer Eye.
Yesterday, somebody asked Sam's opinion about Don't Look Up, and I'd love to hear Nomi's opinion, but I'm also curious to know if there are any globe emoji media takes that the crew would like to highlight.
I haven't seen the film or seen a lot of the reaction to it yet, but I'm planning on watch it.
Have you seen it yet?
Yeah, I have. I have a lot of opinions, but I think what's wonderful about it is that it's going to open up, hopefully, and I'm quoting Josh Fox on this, it's going to open up a space where more films like this are made that are connecting the dots between, whether it's government being completely like stalled and focused on the immediate whatever, and not dealing with real life consequences and just connecting the dots a little bit more. That's my hope. But it was great. I think some of the mainstream, there's been a lot of mainstream takes on it, but has been cheap and weak. And why? Like, what's the point? Like, if you're going to have, I don't know, I'm a big fan. If you're going to have a take on something, what's the greater meaning of it in terms of this kind of film? I think it would have been awesome if it came out in 2016, but I understand that the conditions were not right for that. But it would have been, I think, very transformative, a few years before, because we do all see, at least the audience watching, sees climate change is happening. And I don't know if it's going to move government any faster, but that's, whatever. That's not the point of it.
That's not fraud. The dog that got stung by bees, that looks like Glenn Greenwald. Are you guys going to get dinged on the stream for the weekend music?
Oh, interesting. Are they going to get dinged? Is he going to sue him?
Keep the beard, Sammy. Candace Owens' language in that clip portrays her. It's obvious she knows she's a grifter. She points to obscure websites as a source for vaccine research. Aaron is not cool. Ask Danarchy to include snippets of Emma in the fun half music too. Adieu. It was way more unsafe to have cops walking up and down the cars with nothing to do looking for trouble. And if you wanted the subway to be safe, why not try and updating them to be better facilities, not spending on money on cops, indeed. MR Reddit is horny for the beard. Thank you. Good to know. Let's see.
Once again, with Eric Adams, he's taking real estate money. The MTA board has real estate developers on it. They're not funding because they don't want to tax real estate. They don't want to tax the wealthy. They don't fund the MTA. And it is literally like almost I don't even know if you can fix the MTA at this point.
Well, let's talk about this just briefly. This federal judge apparently, wasn't he the one who also basically held up the ACA for almost a year, this guy? Yes. Reed O'Connor from the Northern District of Texas. They go to this judge quite a bit, and when they want to deal with injunctions. On Monday, yesterday, this George W. Bush appointed judge, Reed O'Connor of the Northern District of Texas, issued a preliminary injunction blocking the Department of Defense from taking any adverse action against 35 Navy sailors who have refused to get vaccinated against the coronavirus, arguing that it violated their religious freedoms. This is insane. First off, don't you need to establish that your religion does not believe in, I would imagine at this point, all vaccines, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess if they are Christian scientists, it's conceivable to me, because Christian scientists don't believe, I don't know if they believe in vaccines or not, but I know that they have issues with medication. But I don't understand how you're in the Navy for any period of time and have never gotten a vaccine. I find that very hard to believe. And how could it possibly be a violation of your religious freedoms for a specific vaccine? I mean, if you've been forced to have other vaccines and you've taken other vaccines, how do you justify, like, well, I'm not taking the COVID one. That's against my religion.
It's the Antichrist one, Sam. That's the problem. We say COVID, they say Antichrist. It's like Brandon and Biden. No, I mean, I think there are people on the internet who are saying it's like given by the devil. Like it's a real kind of.
If you could establish that.
Yeah.
If you could establish that, I could see.
If you could establish that, guys, work on that.
Sincerely held religious beliefs forbid each of them from receiving, this is a quote, that receiving the COVID-19 vaccine for a variety of reasons based upon their Christian faith. Well, like what? What about their Christian faith? It's like, doesn't say you can't have vaccines? I've never heard anything like this. It's absurd. It's absurd. They're insane.
Are they all being represented by the same lawyer? I'm curious to see.
I'm sure it is some right-wing organization that brought the case. There's no doubt in my mind. All the cases are probably rolled into one anyways, but I imagine it's like, that's the way this done. These organizations rally and they do stuff like that. Future in doubt. Just saw an article today about Michigan's redistricting, and Republicans are pissed because new maps give the Democrats advantage. And the Detroit Democrats are pissed because they say it takes away majority black districts. If anyone is pissed, it's probably close to correct. I-5. Thanks for an incredibly informative interview. I'm thinking that the concept of state capture by capital might be the USA's #1 ideological export. Finally, Matt writes that MR tell-all book. Jersey Matt. Last week, a co-worker, unvaxxed, came into the office, got word that her mom tested positive, but then didn't tell anybody until the end of the day. She, the next day, getting a test and told our boss after the rest of us left the office that she tested positive. My boss didn't tell anyone that we had been in contact. The next morning through the grapevine, we all heard that she tested positive, so the company that we rent office space from made us close down for the day. Now my boss, who works from home 75% of the time, while we have to be in the office, is COVID positive. Also, another one of my coworkers, unvaxxed, just got back from spending Christmas and New Year's with her family in Texas and said that her daughter got them all sick. No shot. She got a test and she's in here coughing all over the place. In a 10 by 12 office that we share, I'm screwed. Luckily, I have an interview for a new job. Sorry for the long... I am sorry, man.
You folks are addicted to being protected by the state, just clearly.
Can you imagine? Just like, how fucking low do you gotta go? That's just unbelievable. All right, let's do 5 more of these. Dave the Dave. Sam, just writing to say thank you for voting in the CIA PSYOP to ban Marjorie Taylor Greene from Twitter. Militant apathy. We need to take up donations for Nomi's technology. She always has the issues with it. Is she using a Motorola bag phone and dial-up internet?
No, I'm traveling, and not every place on this planet, or in our country, I should say, has the best internet. And that's why we need to invest in broadband.
Eric Adams is garbage. He's going to be horrible. Oh my God, that guy, self-loathing African, says Militant Apathy. Literally impossible to be in the military without vaccines. Day one, you get to basic, and on every deployment, every one, you get so many shots. Jim from PA. DeSantis won't be able to run with Trump because Trump's ego won't allow for his running mate to have that type of popularity that DeSantis currently enjoys. That's a good point. And also, what does DeSantis get him?
Florida.
But does he? Yeah. Any more than Trump? Any more than Trump would?
Right.
Yeah.
I think he's got to bring in a more religious. He's got to bring in something else.
Gosh, who was there?
Zachary from BAHM. That interview today was fire. The kind of stuff that keeps me a happy subscriber. Keep the beard, you dirty capital coup conservative. Socialist Bear. Anyone looking for a nice pick-me-up should search river and wetland restoration videos. All the awesome work being done to heal our river system and undo some of the legacies of colonialism has really helped me feel better about the future. I'll get one of those. Wetland restoration. River and wetland restoration. Okay. All right, 2 more. Let's go. Scrolling down here. Cattletown Napper. Professional Development Day at our school, and my assistant principal is out with COVID. Also got a call this morning that the vet that we had scheduled a visit for today was out and quarantining due to COVID exposure. Not to mention the people I know that were exposed over the holidays, now looking forward to seeing how many kids have it when they return. Fortunately, ISD is keeping masks. And the final IM of the day. I can't seem to load it for whatever reason. Another angle of the James O'Keefe crew at AmFest, says Bull Prague. I'll look at it later. Nomi, great job today. Folks, check out Nomi's show. What time's it playing?
Tonight, 8 p.m. YouTube, and then Rockfin. And then tomorrow, 8 p.m., we have a special with Stephen Donziger post being in prison.
Oh, that's great. I want to check. Matt, Bradley, great job today. Nomi, great job. See you, folks.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want.